Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Last week I talked about my first impressions of D&D 5th edition, and with that kind of on the way out, I thought I would talk about how I came into the hobby in the first place. Everybody starts somewhere, obviously, so this is kind of a retelling of how I first discovered the Dungeons & Dragons game, as well as maybe some early stories from it, and the first books that I got and some of the early campaigns that I tried to run. So I do encourage you to post in the comments, what first edition of the game you ended up playing, and maybe some early experiences and stories as well, so that we can kind of all share on this together. So I hope you enjoy this week's video. This is my origin stories of how I discovered Dungeons & Dragons. Alright, so the story begins in the year 1999. It was my first year of high school, and for pastimes I had, pretty much just watching professional wrestling or playing video games. This is kind of how I spent my weekends and my time off outside of school. The only types of games I'd ever really heard of at this point were really video games and board games. I wasn't aware of anything else. So one day when I was in school, I saw I saw an acquaintance of mine working on, writing on a piece of paper. And it was a sheet. I hadn't really seen anything quite like it before. And I asked him what it was, and his answer was that he was working on his D&D character. And I had no idea what that was. I had never heard of Dungeons & Dragons before. So I asked him what it was, and he explained it to me, somewhat poorly, but explained to me at least the basic concepts of it. And it seemed like it was something that was really cool. So I thought, hey, what the hell? Give it a shot to see if, I can join the game. He talked to the person that was running the game. He was running it at the school, actually. One of the empty classrooms, actually, during lunches, we were able to go in there. Or there was a place in the basement there where the elevator came down, and there was kind of a little secluded area that you can go into. So we played there. The first character that I made was a human fighter with a two-handed sword, because I'm super original, and it was one of the easiest things that, to play. So if I was just trying to learn the game, I didn't really think that trying to figure out the spell system was really going to be, in my best interest. So they made me a human fighter, and he lasted all of about 2 sessions. I don't even remember if I ever actually gave him a name, and he died pretty spectacularly, actually killed by one of the player characters in the group. So it wasn't necessarily the best start, but I did enjoy it, so I thought I would, continue to play. When the school year ended, so I started this around April of 1999. When the school year ended, some of the guys that we were playing with at school was going to run a campaign actually during the summer, so I joined that. And, I really enjoyed it. I was starting to get more and more into it, and I decided it was about time to start actually investing in the hobby. So I actually went up and purchased my first set of dice, and these are the ones here that I've had since 1999, summer of 99. So I've had these for over 15 years now, which is really kind of crazy to think about it, and they've done me well over the years. So, but it was $7 or $8, really good investment just to get into the basic hobby. And we gamed for the summer. It was a lot of fun. I decided by the end of the summer, I wanted to do this more and more. So the best thing to do was to purchase one of the books, and this is it here. The first ever D&D book that I bought, the 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook. So this is the first book from my collection. I did end up receiving a copy of the Dungeon Master's Guide. This isn't the exact one. I actually ended up giving that one away because it was a little bit damaged, a little bit worn out, but it was the exact same cover, so the same artwork and everything in it. Gave it to a friend of mine who wanted to use it for some of the optional rules. So this is how I spent the summer of 1999. Around the time that school went back in for my grade 11, 20th Century, Fox Rochester, channel 29 where I was, began running the Dungeons & Dragons animated series. So it was actually really kind of cool. It was definitely a cheesy 80s cartoon, but there was a certain amount of charm to it, and it was just really kind of cool to see that this was something that actually, existed. This was something that was around when I was a child. So ended up playing, quite a bit. The person who was originally running for us ended up not going back to the school the following year. I think he transferred to another one. So I decided I was going to pick up the mantle of the Dungeon Master, and ran a few adventures, which were unbelievably bad. I mean, I can't remember too much about them. I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I had the DMG, and I had the player's handbook, and I had some, stat modifiers for different monsters, and I just basically made a whole bunch of NPCs, and had no idea of game balance or encounter design. Just kind of threw some stuff together. I did eventually pick up the monsters manual, but it was quite a bit later. And by the time I got this, it was actually kind of near the end of my second edition days. But the adventures that I first ran were, like I said, they were pretty bad. I'm not going to pretend that they were, works of art or anything. And in a lot of cases, incredibly lethal. There was one scenario where I had the players trapped in a dungeon and they had to overcome a Dracolich to escape, and they just weren't high enough level for it. So they pretty much all got wiped. The last two player characters I allowed to escape, just because I felt bad I'd killed so many. So that was my first kind of experience with the Dungeons & Dragons game. Played second edition. It was an interesting system, but it was one that I found that people just really weren't interested in teaching. It was, the rules weren't the most intuitive, and a lot of times you weren't really sure when you wanted to roll high or low. So it was kind of difficult from that perspective. A lot of the experienced players just really didn't have the patience to kind of explain the intricacies of things like THAC0. And I mean, even to this day, I can tell you if I hit knowing the enemy's armor class, but I'm still not 100% sure what armor class I actually ended up hitting. The modern games all have like a base armor class of 10, and then the numbers go up with the more protection that you have. In the AD&D games, it was you start with a base 10 and then it subtracts. So an armor class of 0 was actually really good, and an armor class of 10 was absolutely horrible. So the reason I actually bought the player's handbook, not just because I really wanted to get into the game, but I actually wanted to know how to play the game. Like so the players just weren't interested in teaching me, so I got the book, read through it, and there's a lot of really good examples in here actually of how to calculate things that makes it a lot easier. That being said, I started in 1999. The following year was the release of Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition. And this was a lot easier to kind of wrap your head around. Everything was adding bonuses, trying to equal or exceed a target number, as opposed to trying to figure out, okay, it's an attack roll, so I want to roll high, or it's a skill check, so I want to roll low. So this was just a much better system. The D20 system was a lot easier to wrap your head around, and it was a lot easier to teach new players, and that's something that I always kind of enjoyed. And I found that, with 3rd edition, it was just simply easier to do that. Really enjoyed running this, for the 3 years that it was out before they revamped it. And I also ended up basically, kind of taking these books to school after graduation. I went back for an extra year, and these were in my backpack more than any school books. I was only taking a few courses, so I ended up having these, and I worked on some games, and it was good. It was kind of an interesting experience, and I got a lot better at running encounters or designing adventures. Still not necessarily the greatest stuff. I still didn't really have, the best ability to do things like name villages or even NPCs. So a lot of it was just kind of linear, traveling from one town to the other, and basically taking on the role of mercenaries, which is similar to how I ran my 2nd edition stuff, but I wasn't actually clever enough to say that, yeah, you guys are just mercenaries. In this, it was just kind of random stuff and hoping that pieces would fall together. With this, a little bit more planned out. I had some basic structures, some basic ideas of what I wanted to do. And I actually ended up taking these books to school one day. There was a gaming club, which I did not know about. I wish I did. I would have joined it a lot sooner. They were just doing mostly computer stuff. But I figured, some of them were interested in playing Dungeons & Dragons, so I they made up some characters. And we had, a short little adventure, which ended pretty poorly, but everyone really enjoyed it. So those were kind of my first, year and a half with the D&D hobby. So that's kind of how I encountered it. I had no idea what it was beforehand. Ended up learning about it and instantly just kind of fell in love with the game and with the idea. As it stands now, all the friends that I have, for the most part, with maybe a couple of exceptions, are all people that I end up playing D&D with, and I either met them at my local game shop when it was around, or they were people that I met at the very beginning when I first kind of got into the hobby. It was a great hobby. I love it to this day. it's, you know, almost a lifestyle more than necessarily a hobby, which sounds really cheesy, but, you know, it's kind of the case. Really enjoy this. This is kind of my way of staying connected to it. I mean, I don't get to run as much as I used to. It's actually been several months since I've really run anything even remotely resembling a campaign. So, you know, these videos are kind of a way just to keep connected to the D&D hobby and to gamers in general. Because I know that, you know, if you're watching this, hopefully you're a gamer. Hopefully this will kind of bring back fond memories of when you first discovered D&D. And like I said earlier, you know, please feel free to leave comments underneath, underneath the video, just kind of explaining how you discovered the hobby. Did you learn from it from a friend? Did you see it played and kind of wanted to join? You know, how did you discover, you know, this wonderful pastime? So that was my origin stories for Dungeons and Dragons, how I encountered it in the first place. I hope you really enjoyed it. I'll be back next week with another video. Thank you, YouTube.